prayer. Lord, thank you for this day. We pray that you will watch over us today. Pray that you will bless our service times to follow, and pray that you will help us to make some sense of the things that seem to be happening very quickly in our world. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, bless us today, amen. But look, I'm going to call this today at breakneck speed. It is increasingly difficult to keep up with the pace of things that are happening in the world. It is just, it's unbelievable. I'm spending a lot of hours doing this, and I try to make this cogent, coherent, and every time I turn around, there's 12, 15, 20, 80 things to add to what I want to do. So let me just kind of give you sort of like a review of what I did this week in case you want to go look at that. And then I'll tell you a little bit about what I have planned coming up this week or in the next month or so. So if you want to skip that and you're listening to this on the recorded one, you can fast forward a couple minutes and you won't have to listen to this. So this week I did a number of interviews. I would highly recommend that you go listen to them, not so much the interviews that I did of people interviewing me, but of interviews that I conducted. Last Monday, I was able to get a little bit of time with Jonathan Spire, who I consider to be the preeminent military war correspondent in all of the Middle East. He's with the Middle East Forum. It's only about 33 minutes, so just take a little bit of time and watch that. You will learn a lot from someone who has tremendous amount of on-the-ground experience in Syria and Iraq and elsewhere in the Middle East. Then Tuesday, I did an interview of a lady. She's an Orthodox Jew. She lives in a home overlooking Shiloh. I will be honest with you, in my opinion, it's one of the most fascinating interviews I've ever been able to participate in. Her name is Eliana Passington. She and her husband built their home because they wanted their home to overlook the site of the ancient tabernacle in Shiloh. She is just a phenomenal lady, 8 children. And one of these, as you travel around Israel, you will hear story after story of this community or that community that really pivoted around a strong Jewish woman at some point. The reconstruction of Hebron, Efrat, Gush Etzion, and up around Shiloh. It's a phenomenal interview. I also saw, by the way, an interview or a little video of the Israel guys going into Nablus to Shem and Jacob's Well. And I've talked a lot about that, but if you want to kind of get a little bit of the basics, they went in there. It's not really a great, safe place to go. I was on Stand Up for the Truth. I think there's something else that I'm forgetting. That was Thursday. I've recorded some that should be played in the next week or so. I won't tell you about those yet. Also sat down and had about an hour and a half conversation with Dr. Mike Spalding from Calvary Chapel, Lima. I'll be participating in a conference that he's organizing in Brookville, Ohio in July. I think it's the last weekend in July, called Go Therefore. I know Olivier Melnick, Tom Hughes, and some others will be there, and then Olivier will be here the next Sunday. This week I'll be doing an interview with Gary McKibben from Ireland, Northern Ireland this week, a good friend. I'll also be doing a interview with Kurt Reed on Thursday. I'm sure I've got a couple others in there that I'm not thinking about. I think I'll record something with Olivier Melnick tomorrow, and he'll probably put it up a day or two later. And then I will be doing a conference I'll be doing Rock Harbor Church in Bakersfield on March 11th. That'll be streamed live, but if you want to show up in person, they have a great Wednesday evening meal. I think on March 8th, I'm going to do something with Tom Hughes at 412 Church. Still not, I just have time to check. And then on March 20 through 22, I will be at Harvest Life in Las Vegas with some other guys, Tom Hughes, Pete Garcia, Kurt Reed, I think Billy Crone, and maybe one other at Harvest Life, Calvary Chapel in North Las Vegas, March 20 to 22. That should keep us busy for a little while. And also pray for me. You need to understand, I don't have a staff. I haven't figured out I don't want to use an AI agent to do it, but when I do these interviews, I just want you to know if I do an hour interview, it's taking me at least 3 hours to schedule that, make arrangements for it, do the graphics, get things coordinated with schedules. So it does cut into time a little bit, but go to the YouTube channel and check those out. Oh yeah, I did a 2.5 hour long prophecy roundtable on technocracy and technology on Wednesday evening. And I'd highly recommend that you watch that as well. Okay, commercial's over, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about AI. There's a lot going on there. This, again, if you looked at the pile of slides that I have and what I've been able to organize, you will be amazed that I can make any sense of this at all, because it's just, again, everything is happening at breakneck speed, as I've said. And I'm just hoping that while I'm doing this today, that President Trump doesn't try to start the war in Iran until I can at least, digest everything that's happening. So there's a lot going on in the AI space, some of it very troubling. And part of this is I don't know what the answer is on this. I don't personally use AI agents. I will use AI as a search engine. And I think there's even things that we use. For example, I have a subscription to Logos, Bible software. Logos has, and I've not tried it yet, an AI agent that's supposed to be trained on Logos materials. And so when you ask questions, it will base its answers on those materials. But then they have a pretty broad library. For example, I don't know if they curate their libraries this way, but when I go there, I get, well, you seem to be a Pentecostal, or you seem to be a charismatic, or you seem to be a Baptist or Reformed. And so I get all these different offers. And so I would say, Logos has various libraries, like they have Baptist, they have liberal Baptists, they have Methodist libraries, they have charismatics, they have, I don't know if they call it the Wingnut Library, but I think that probably is appropriate. So you get a broad spectrum of material there. And when you ask questions, it's going to draw from that universe. So you have to be very careful what universe of materials you're asking AI questions of. Everything that I read, and I could play you hours of quotes of people speaking at various conferences. And I'm going to go down a little bit of a rabbit trail here. I've been doing this for a lot of years, 25 or more years, every week. And it used to be we would talk about it 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20. Now you could talk about, I think, things that are relevant to Bible prophecy for hours and hours every week, a couple times a week, and do it daily, and still not keep up with everything that's going on. So and the other thing that I've noticed, in addition to vast amounts of information coming out, is that, let me use an example of vast amounts of information. So they released some of the Epstein files. They released 3 million pages. They're only halfway through it. And it's very complicated. I've been a trial lawyer for a lot of years. I've been in cases where we have a universe of documents that's the size of what the Epstein files are, even up to 6, 7, 8 times the size of the Epstein files. And to get through that amount of material, we would have teams of lawyers working on that type of material for years. And what you do is you can't read it all. So you have to kind of create search capability. So even back in the early 2000s, we were using early forms of artificial intelligence that would make relational connections between documents. And then we could connect those documents to witnesses or to pieces of evidence and that type of thing. But it's a very complicated process. I'm trying to indicate for you how quickly AI is changing that space. People have taken, one guy set up, I think it's called JPedia for Jeffreypedia or something like that, where they've taken, and a couple guys have done this, they've taken all of the Epstein documents, which have the text embedded in the documents, and then they've taken the names and they've created these huge trees of relationships between the emails and the person, things that we used to take years and years to do with a team of lawyers. One guy can do this in like 3 days to a week. Now, what does that mean? That's sort of the next part of what I want to talk about AI. This is going to be very disruptive from an employment standpoint. There are some people who are going to get it, figure it out, and they're going to make a lot of money and have jobs. But there are a lot of jobs that are highly automated, and they're kind of going to go away. And I don't know how many that is, but I listen to Elon Musk, who seems to be a pretty smart guy. And sometimes and so there's some things to admire about him, but his personal life is kind of a train wreck. Not a train wreck, it is a train wreck. But he understands, I think, the space, and he's saying jobs are going to go away. There's a lot of people who are not going to need to work. And so then the question is, what do we do with them? And then when you have the tech intrusion and control grid that they're able to build through AI and technology and cryptocurrency and digital currency and all that, this is an unprecedented thing in human history. And I don't know what the answering is. So you see here, this is from Epic Times. AI startups kept afloat despite never becoming profitable. So there's a lot of people, and they will tell you we're at an apocalypse of jobs. And then you'll see articles by other guys, everything's going to be okay. This is all positive. And the people who say there's going to be loss of jobs don't know what they're talking about, because we've had these changes in the past. We had the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s. When the car came in, there was a big controversy. What are the people who make buggy whips for horses that drive coaches and wagons, what are they going to do for a living? And everybody said they'll just go get a job making stuff in a factory where you make cars. The problem now is that everything is being automated at the factory level, and it's being done on a scale that's never been seen before in human history. And that causes a lot of other problems. Let me give you okay, that's G. We don't need to talk about him right now. Maybe never. Oh, excuse me. I thought I'd copied these things over and I didn't. Hang on. Okay, so this is an example. So this is front page this morning, New York Times. Yes, I read the New York Times because sometimes they cover things that nobody else does. And when you want to know what's going on with Trump sometimes, they're so upset with Trump that they will tell you everything that he's doing, and it's a place to go and get Not only the opinion of people that don't like him, but actually what he's actually doing. But here's a lady, I don't know where she is. She lives in a rural community alone. She's 85. Her choice is to go to a nursing facility, which she cannot afford. So they have bought her this robot. You see it sitting there in the middle. It says to stay in her home, she let in an AI robot. And in the article, they talk to experts about this. This is kind of unusual. And there's this thing, the intensity of the relationship is much deeper than we ever thought. And this article, it's also I think I put it in here. Well, I did, but now I don't see it. But here's there's a big 2-page spread in the Times. Actually, I think this is it right here. Nope, that's mama drones dropping treats to Ukrainian soldiers. This is just a crazy world. So, will AI companions turn every man into an island? This is the opinion section of today's New York Times. And it's a concern because these chatbots are now being found that at times they get out of control and they actually bully the people that are talking with them. And so here's this lady living alone, and she's developed this relationship with this robot. This has huge implications across society. This is crashing birth rates everywhere. Here's a article that says worries grow about how fast AI can move. That's Ross Douthat, and he's sort of the token religion guy at the New York Times. Every great innovation has led to fears of mass unemployment. But they don't talk about the real terms of this, in that the innovation is at a scale that we've never seen before. Saw an interview with Elon Musk. If you want to work in the future, learn to be a plumber or a carpenter or something with your hands, or really, really get smart on computers and AI tools. But then it used to be become a coder. Remember when everybody said, go learn computer coding? All of the executives in the software business are saying coding is dead as a career. You might have a guy who leads coding done all by machine, all by AI. And so and what are we going to do with these people? And the problem is these people develop relationships with chatbots. They don't have relationships with other people, like men with women. And so here's this, I think this is kind of a crazy article. To increase birth rates, abolish commutes. And over there it says, the pandemic shows we can increase fertility by letting people work from home. Now, this is a nutty idea. Because look, what do they say? Well, we should all just live in 15-minute cities. Part of the problems is living in cities to begin with is what collapses fertility rates. And I'm looking at statistics all over the world, and the world's kind of catching up a little bit, but they are so far behind. And that's the problem. So let's talk a little bit about, let's see, what's this one? Oh, this is The Economist today. Why social media bans won't work. In Europe, they're trying to ban social media because, children can't use it, adults can't use it, you can't use it between certain hours of the day. Listen, that sounds like Iran. We don't want to live in Iran. And the reason they're doing that is because they don't want you to get information that they don't want you to have. And this is a problem. So there is a huge problem on X and elsewhere. You have to be very careful. I do use X quite a bit to curate news and find information. because it's in a fast-moving world, mainstream media, newspapers and news magazines and television are way behind. And very often I'll talk about things here on the weekend, and Pam will turn on Fox News on Monday in the morning. She says, oh, they're talking about what you talked about yesterday. They haven't been talking about that at all. That's because it takes time to catch up, and they have producers and all these things that they have, all these hoops that they don't have to jump through that we don't. So this is a big problem. So now what I want to do, I'm going to talk about Middle East and security issues. I started to mention that the other thing that's happening now is there are one or two major geopolitical, financial, technology conferences every week. Davos, then the World Government Summit, then these finance things in the Middle East, real estate seminars in Saudi Arabia. And you'll say, well, what does that have to do with what you talk about? And the answer is it has everything to do, because the Bible is a book. Go listen to Eliana Passatin's interview with me and tell me that the book is not a Bible about real estate. And in a large part, a particular part of real estate in the world, about the size of New Jersey, it is about real estate, but it's also about geopolitics, which itself is about real estate. So all of these prophecies we read about, Ezekiel 36, Ezekiel 37, Ezekiel 35, Ezekiel 38 and 39, Jeremiah 49, Jeremiah 50, 51, and Isaiah 17, all of these are about particular pieces of real estate. So if you want to know what's going on, watch what's going on. The other thing to keep in mind, though, is you go through these Bible prophecies. For example, in Ezekiel 38, that one's talked about probably more than any other passage in the Bible prophecy community. And then we get into a big argument. Does it happen really soon? Does it happen before the 70th week, at the beginning of the 70th week, in the middle of the 70th week, or at the end? I could think it's towards the end, part of the Armageddon scenario. And you can disagree with that. But when you listen to rabbis talk about, and I know they're Orthodox rabbis, they're not Christians, I get that. But they have a historical understanding of how the Jewish community has looked at those tests. For example, I was listening to a rabbi, and I can tell you this rabbi from other stuff on his channel, he hates Christians. He loathes Christians. That's his choice. But I listened to him for information about Ezekiel 38, the war of Gog and Magog, and he made a couple of interesting points. One that I was not really aware of, because I don't worship in a Jewish synagogue each week. And in the synagogues, they have passages of scripture, almost like a liturgical calendar, that they read every year. Eliana Passatin, when she was talking about Shiloh, the prayer of Hannah in the first part of 1 Samuel was very important to her, because where did the prayer of Hannah happen? At Shiloh, where she prayed for a son that she could dedicate to the Lord. My house, she says, I built my house so I could look down on that site. So I think is a very biblical thing to do. But when is the story of the prayer of Hannah read in the synagogues every year? At the feast at Rosh Hashanah. Because it's really the first prayer recorded in the Bible. Ezekiel 38 and 39 is read at, and I was just in Israel at Sukkot, it's read at the Feast of Tabernacles. Because they view that as this war, and what happens after it is the beginning of the great Messianic age. Now, we should relate to that as the beginning of the Messianic age, what we call the millennial kingdom. And the Feast of Tabernacles is God dwelling with us, and it all begins to fit. So now I forget. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Middle East, I'm going to talk about the Munich Security Conference and play a long clip of Marco Rubio. We have limited time. We have a church business meeting today. That's why I'm doing it early. And then I have a bazillion other things. So leading into the Munich Security Conference, the Munich security people, I will get to the Middle East in a moment because they're all related. You need the accusation launched against people who talk about Bible prophecy is, oh, you're just doom and gloomers and you want the apocalypse. And so what I do is I curate people who are very far removed from evangelical Christianity or the Bible prophecy community. And I bring them to you to show you, if you think I'm upset about what things are going on, and I'm not really, because I know the ultimate end, but listen to what these people say, what they write. So they have this big report, 128 pages. You can download it. There's a link in the show, or when I get around to putting the show notes in. Under destruction. That's how they view what's going on in the world today. These are the leading European security experts. And when I talk with my friends about, so where's this beast empire come from? You know, I get fed a lot of times. It's a revived Roman Empire based out of Europe. And I'm going to show you some things that should call that into question, particularly if at the same time you're saying all of this stuff is going to wrap up very quickly. Because I see a disconnect there. So it's either look at alternative ideas that people have set out about how these things are going to unfold, but pay attention to those that people have talked about for a long time. And I used to call it baskets. I'm not sure if that's an accurate analogy. We could call them silos, but silos are kind of disconnected. I've served on boards in charitable organizations, and sometimes I've said, we don't have silos around here. We have balloons filled with hot air. Everybody's got their own ideas, their own little thing that they want to do. And so the balloons float around within the organization and they bump into each other, and then there's turmoil when they bump into each other. And they float because they're not full of helium, they're full of hot air, which is what the people are sometimes anyway. Myself excluded, of course. So I think that I use baskets, buckets, whatever you want. And sometimes I wonder if I need to have a three-dimensional picture of my buckets and my baskets, because what happens if the basket overflows? Well, it's going to overflow into another basket and cause that one. So it's very complicated. So I look at all these different ideas objectively. At least I'll say I'm objective, and everybody else will say they're objective, and then we'll fight about who's more objective or not. But listen to what this said. This is the executive summary of this. The world has entered a period of wrecking ball politics. So right there, 3 potential title slides coming up. So you'll see a wrecking ball, sweeping destruction rather than careful reforms and policy corrections is the order of the day. The most prominent of those who promise to free their country from the existing order's constraints and rebuild a stronger, more prosperous nation is the current U.S. administration. As a result, more than 80 years after construction began, the U.S.-led post-1945 international order is now under destruction. So there you see it. And this is from the Arab News this morning, the editorial cartoon. You see the world there, the international system, and a mercy bullet. Shoot us in the head and get this over with. Do you see the analogy of what they're saying? Because they're very disconcerted. They don't know where this is going. And part of it is they are leading to their own destruction. But it's interesting, in this blurb, It said the U.S.-led post-1945 international order is now under destruction. So I'm going to play you a clip of Marco Rubio in a minute. And I believe that Marco and the people at the State Department read this 122 pages of stuff. And the U.S. is responding to this in a way that the U.S. has never responded to before this, leading up to the security conference in Munich. And by the way, Hillary Clinton was there. All these, what is she doing there? She goes retire, go home. I don't understand it. I guess it's hard to get away from that. So this was in Bild. That's a German paper. Also another one. It was also picked up in the Daily Mail yesterday. Putin could defeat NATO with 15,000 troops. Expert explains the attack simulation in a podcast. Just in time for the Munich Security Conference, the headline, Putin's 15,000 soldiers can beat NATO. So they did a war game simulation. I maybe hope to go to one in May down in D.C., the Middle East Forum. They're going to do a war game simulation too as part of their annual conference in the United States in D.C. And guess what the war game simulation is at the Middle East Forum. Now, look, this is Daniel Pipes, is one of the guys who helped start that. Jonathan Spires there, Dexter Van Zyl. So I know people there at the forum. They do a lot of good work. Don't agree with them on everything as usual. The war game simulation this year is, what if Turkey gets nuclear weapons? What's going to happen to the world? And so they talk about this. Could Putin take 15,000 soldiers? If he could get 15,000 soldiers, he's running short. They're losing, I don't know how many hundred a week in Ukraine. Someplace in here I have curated a story, and I'll try to get to that. And so the question is, but they looked at it and they said, yeah, Europe has vastly bigger armies, more aircraft, more tanks, all of this stuff. But what does Europe lack? Political will and direction. Now, they're trying to revive that through the Munich Security Conference. And so if you believe in a revived Roman Empire based in Europe, go watch all of the speeches there and ask yourself, if this is wrapping up soon, are these guys going to lead this revived Roman Empire? So it's interesting. Macron comes out in the Financial Times the other day, transatlantic strains. Again, a lot of stories leading up to the Munich Security Conference. Macron urges EU not to bow to U.S. aggression. So I think he's trying to get around my chess piece that I designed based on the way France and he acts. So there's a big question. And I get stuff all the time. Russia's going to invade the U.S. Russia's ready to invade the Middle East, all this stuff. And this looks at that and says, yeah, Europe has 4 times the amount of soldiers, but no political will. Putin has the will, but he's running out of equipment. Europe doesn't have enough equipment, so they need to manufacture it. What's the problem? Climate change policies and energy policies have almost completely deindustrialized Europe. They can't build anything. I was reading someplace where in the UK they have trouble finding steel to build ships. They don't make it much anymore. The other problem is, though, Putin's under sanctions and he's used up a lot of equipment in the war, and it will take him time to reconstitute his war machine, and it could take several years. So they're sort of on a track like, well, this could happen, but it's probably several years down the road. And is Europe going to be able to reindustrialize? Is Putin going to be able to get out from under sanctions and rebuild his forces? And Putin now has a huge problem in Chechnya. If you remember the war that they had with Chechnya 25 years ago, they resolved that with a family, a guy named Kadyrov. But Kadyrov, he's about 49. He's got cancer. There's rumors that he's not doing very well. He may not last. And who's going to take over Chechnya? And are they going to still have this alliance with Putin? And they're sending soldiers into Ukraine and that type of thing for not much gain. So this is a graphic from one of the articles. I thought it was pretty good about Putin, the reality of the Russian military, an army on the verge of extinction, exhaustion. A sober assessment of Russia's actual military situation stands in stark contrast to the headline. The Institute for the Study of War, in its comprehensive analysis from November 2025, arrives at a damning conclusion. Since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the Russian military has undergone a rapid and comprehensive transformation, optimizing itself for conducting trench warfare. The degraded armed forces are now likely no longer capable of conducting effective large-scale maneuver warfare. Russia can only carry out positional offenses and is incapable of significant operational maneuvers. The casualty figures from the war in Ukraine are catastrophic for Russia. According to Ukrainian data, and I know you can question the source, Russia has lost over 1.2 million soldiers by January 2026. This thing that all these Russian experts told us was going to be over in 2 weeks. No, it wasn't. 3 days, then 2 weeks, then 6 months, then a year, 2 years. Now we're at 4 years in a few weeks. A week from today, I believe, or soon within a week, will be the 4-year anniversary of that invasion. 30,000 soldiers, Russian soldiers, killed in December 2025 alone. Another 30,000 wounded or missing each month. In 2025, Russia recruited 400,000 to 405,000 men for contract service, a monthly average of about 34,000, which is lower than the total monthly losses of around 60,000. Russia can't keep up. But Europe can't keep up. When you talk to German people, like, well, we don't really want to draft people into the military. Why? Because they'll all be Islamic and we don't want to give them weapons. So, big problem. Is Russia going to be, or is Europe going to be able to reconstitute itself? What's Russia going to do? Here, he's in a lot of trouble because of people in his government and the Epstein files and all that. Here's Keir Starmer at Munich Security Conference.
We shouldn't get in the warm bath of complacency and think that, therefore, all we're really doing is reasserting the continuation of what we've had for the last 80 years. That would be a mistake. And it'd be a particular mistake for Europe, because my strong view is that Europe hasn't done enough in its own defense and security for many years. And the conflict in Ukraine has flushed that out, shown it to be the reality. And it falls to us as leaders to recognize that, to change and strengthen Europe, which is what I'm arguing for, what Ursula is arguing for, and not just say that, but follow it with actions. And Ursula's taken the lead on this in the work that she's done, particularly on the funding of the defense work that needs to be done, because we will only be able to preserve NATO in the way it is needed for the next 80 years if we change and strengthen the European dimension. That is something which a number of American presidents have said for some time. I believe to be true, and I think we've got to seize this movement to move forward, not to pull apart the transatlantic relationship, but to make sure it works in the circumstances and the times that we face.
So he sounds like Donald Trump. We haven't done enough. We need to spend more money. And Christiane Amanpour over there is choking on her tongue, trying to bite it. And von der Leyen is there. She's like, I don't know if I really like this. But we're no better in America. Everybody says, well, AOC, she will offer a great vision for how we should handle foreign policy engagement and geopolitics. And it's interesting, in the New York Times today, Ocasio-Cortez offers working class vision with some stumbles. Some stumbles? Really? So here's a guy, he tweeted, he said this. This is a clip of her at the Munich Security Conference in public, on a stage, recorded on video for all time. And I'm going to Send it to AI and see if you can make sense of what she just said here. We used to criticize Kamala Harris for her word salads. This is a word salad bar, if you want. And the guy who I found this said, this is the Hindenburg crashing into the Titanic at Chernobyl. So, you will find there are a lot of very clever people in the world. You can find them on X if you can wade through all the garbage. But here we go. AOC at Munich, representing our United States.
Would and should the U.S. actually commit U.S. troops to defend Taiwan if China were to move?
I think that this is such a, I think that this is this is of course a very long-standing policy of the United States. And I think what we are hoping for is that we want to make sure that we never get to that point. And we want to make sure that we are moving in all of our economic research and our global positions to avoid any such confrontation and for that question to even arise.
Okay, so if she would get elected president, I will have more time to do prophecy updates. Why? Because I will be too scared to sleep at night. She's being touted as the leading candidate to run against a Republican. So here is her name is Karis. I think she's from Estonia. Her husband is corrupt. She's now, I think, the European foreign policy chief. And she was talking about, I don't know what people are talking about. People love Europe. Well, here's what she said.
Contrary to what some may say, woke, decadent Europe is not facing civilizational erasure. In fact, people still want to join our club, and not just fellow Europeans. When I was in Canada last year, I was told that over 40% of Canadians have an interest in joining the European Union. So the waiting list is quite long. I just hope that those who have been waiting for quite some time would not have to wait for longer.
And so what do we see? Listen, what 2 Thessalonians say? There will be a great delusion in the end times. Okay. If I had a basket full of delusional comments that I see from world leaders every week, it would be very big and overflowing every week. This is insane. Spain is bringing in, 600,000 here it is. Socialist Spain's amnesty for illegal migrants may unleash an influx to Europe and Britain not seen since Angela Merkel threw open Germany's door 11 years ago. They're talking bringing in like 600,000 immigrants. By the way, that's just the lead because the people that are related to them get to come too. We're talking millions of people. They don't share, I guess they don't share what you would think about European values. And Giorgia Meloni in Italy, she's tried to fight against this, but the courts fight against her. These leftist judges all over the world are calling everything down. So under this article says, from De Welt in Germany, Italy's government under Giorgia Meloni is tightening its migration policy. The cabinet approved a draft law intended to strengthen instruments to combat illegal migration and ensure stricter management of migration flows. While other heads of government are waiting, Meloni is pushing the boundaries of EU asylum law. And she's having problems when she's getting it through the legislature, getting it implemented, and nobody else in Europe is even trying. Boats like crazy are coming into the UK every week. It's out of control. So here is okay. I'll tell you what, hang on a second. I'm going to add in a little bit longer clip because I'm just going to play 3 minutes. There's a link to the full clip in the show notes. This is Marco Rubio at the Munich Security Conference. I would highly recommend that you go and listen to it. It's a fantastic speech. And by the way, in response to the speech, so you saw this lady that I just played.
Contrary
and what
to
she
what
was saying,
some may say,
that's
woke,
her watching
decadent Europe
Marco's speech
is not
at the
facing
Munich Security Conference in
civilizational
the
erasure.
crowd. She
In
was
fact,
not too happy. So Rubio extends modicum of reassurance to our friends here in Europe, and people are melting down over this. So here's just a few-minute clip of that.
For 5 centuries before the end of the Second World War, the West had been expanding. Its missionaries, its pilgrims, its soldiers, its explorers pouring out from its shores to cross oceans, settle new continents, build vast empires extending out across the globe. But in 1945, for the first time since the age of Columbus, it was contracting. Europe was in ruins. Half of it lived behind an iron curtain, and the rest looked like it would soon follow. The great Western empires had entered into terminal decline, accelerated by godless communist revolutions, and by anti-colonial uprisings that would transform the world and drape the red hammer and sickle across vast swaths of the map in the years to come. Against that backdrop, then as now, many came to believe that the West's age of dominance had come to an end, and that our future was destined to be a faint and feeble echo of our past. But together, our predecessors recognized that decline was a choice, and it was a choice they refused to make. This is what we did together once before, and this is what President Trump and the United States want to do again now, together with you. And this is why we do not want our allies to be weak, because that makes us weaker. We want allies who can defend themselves so that no adversary will ever be tempted to test our collective strength. This is why we do not want our allies to be shackled by guilt and shame. We want allies who are proud of their culture and of their heritage, who understand that we are heirs to the same great and noble civilization, and who together with us are willing and able to defend it. And this is why we do not want allies to rationalize the broken status quo rather than reckon with what is necessary to fix it. For we in America have no interest in being polite and orderly caretakers of the West's managed decline. We do not seek to separate, but to revitalize an old friendship and renew the greatest civilization in human history. What we want is a reinvigorated alliance that recognizes that what has ailed our societies is not just a set of bad policies, but a malaise of hopelessness and complacency. The alliance that we want is one that is not paralyzed into inaction by fear. Fear of climate change, fear of war, fear of technology. Instead, we want an alliance that boldly races into the future. And the only fear we have is the fear of the shame of not leaving our nations prouder, stronger, and wealthier for our children. An alliance ready to defend our people, to safeguard our interests, and to preserve the freedom of action that allows us to shape our own destiny. Not one that exists to operate a global welfare state and atone for the purported sins of past generations. An alliance that does not allow its power to be outsourced, constrained, or subordinated to systems beyond its control. One that does not depend on others for the critical necessities of its national life. And one that does not maintain the polite pretense that our way of life is just one among many, and that asks for permission before it acts. And above all, an alliance based on the recognition that we, the West, have inherited together, what we have inherited together is something that is unique and distinctive and irreplaceable. Because this, after all, is the very foundation of the transatlantic bond.
So there's a lot of things we could say about that. I may have time. I don't know if I have time this morning to play the the Crown Prince, the Shah Pahlavi from Iran. He was interviewed by Christiane Amanpour. And by the way, I've watched Christiane Amanpour all these years. I think she's Lebanese. She will be salivating and so deferential when she's interviewing people from Iran, like the guy who used to be president. I always called him, I'm mad about jihad, Ahmadinejad. And he's still around, and she's just so different. But she interviews Pahlavi. Well, Israel supports you, don't they? And you'll see, if I have time to play it, I will. But there's a lot going on. So Trump and Bibi met at the White House this week. Not a ton of information out there. I think it was more of a operational meeting to talk about what's going on. The INSS website, let's see, I don't know if this will work or not. Let's see. Well, I'm not going to try to do that. So there's the INSS website. This is a map of the Middle East, Iran, and you can see there's a tremendous amount of firepower there. Aircraft carriers, submarine ships, aircraft. There have been like 150 C-117 flights from the U.S. over to bases in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia's backed off a little bit about using their bases. But everything is in a huge amount of turmoil. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen. This is interesting. This is a security alert. So the State Department has some similar information on their website about travel to Iran. So if you're thinking about it, don't. But this is February 5th, and look what it says here. There's a blown up part. Leave Iran now. This has been going on for about a month now. Have a plan for departing Iran that does not rely on U.S. government help. And then it goes through and it tells about all the different border crossings. Azerbaijan, border closed, don't go that way. You can try Armenia. You can try Turkey, but good luck because it's going to be difficult to get through there. They're going to ask a lot of questions, and it's a problem. I saw a report on I-24. Hang on, I don't think I put that into my. Again, I apologize. This is very difficult to do these days. Let's see. Well, I can't seem to find it now. It must have got stuck in the wrong folder. So here is a discussion on I-24 News. Ruth Wasserman Landy is involved in this discussion, somebody I really respect a lot. I think she's an important voice. So here we go.
Turkey is working hard to secure a deal and avoid any military strike on the regime in Iran. The Foreign Minister, Hakan Fidan, says both the United States and Iran are showing flexibility in efforts to revive a nuclear deal. He claims the US is willing to tolerate limited Iranian uranium enrichment, but warns that including the ballistic missile program could derail the talks. More on that, Dr. Sinan Sidi is a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Welcome to the program, Sinan. So, dealing with Iran's ballistic missiles is a key issue for Israel. Turkey seems unconcerned, though, and says it should be left out of the negotiations. Why?
Yeah, I think Turkey is trying to play both sides. On the one hand, they would prefer, or this is their preferred outcome, to have a weakened regime remain in office and in power, simply because that will allow Turkey to focus on allowing Iran's proxies to continue agitating regional Israel through things like Hamas and what's left of Hezbollah. And that's enough for what Erdogan wants. So that's the preferred outcome. On the other hand, I think if the regime is struck or or taken out and replaced, I think Erdogan, that's the second sort of preferred plan, which would allow him to concentrate on expanding Turkish hard power into a region where the Iranian regime no longer exists. But right now, they're trying to see if they can figure out any way for war to be avoided.
Well, we know that President Trump does respect President Erdogan. He does listen to him. Might the Turks be successful in convincing Trump not to take any military action?
I mean, certainly they've been trying very, very hard. I mean, we had an instance of the Turkish Foreign Ministry yesterday put up a post congratulating the regime for its National Day, which was obviously rebuked by a significant number of Iranians. So there's a fundamental inability or unwillingness to read the room on part of the Erdogan regime, and whether Trump listens to him or not is TBD. But we do know this. I mean, Erdogan has been trying through, himself directly, but also through his foreign minister, Fidan, as you pointed out, to really press hard to avoid any military action against Iran. And we've seen them, volunteer to host the talks, any sort of negotiations in Istanbul, which were unsuccessful up until now. But also, we're assuming that this is going on behind the scenes, and they're trying to see if there's any out they can give Trump, such that a military strike does not happen.
Is this Turkey trying to fill Qatar's shoes and be the kind of global mediator playing both sides, speaking to everyone?
Yeah, I mean, look, they've certainly they have the military clout, if not the financial clout, as well as the diplomatic clout, to sort of really wedge themselves into this sort of space. But it also is a reflection on Turkey's own potential actions to essentially see if it can become not just the premier regional power, but they're also looking into things like acquiring nuclear weapons themselves. Given what's going on in the region, Erdogan's foreign minister was very sort of clear about this in the last 2 days when he was on camera on Turkish TV, suggesting that Turkey might go this way. They really are sort of essentially positioning themselves in an expansionary move to sort of not necessarily just be Qatar, but at the premier hard and soft power in the region, because they also see this as an opportunity.
Dr. Sinan Sidi at the FDD, thank you. Meanwhile, phase 2 of the Gaza ceasefire remains stalled as Hamas refuses to disarm. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu really keeping this brief, keeping their cards very close to their chest. But there is a fear, isn't there, a kind of underlying fear that the Americans might just sign a limited nuclear deal and save this regime.
My instinct tells me that this will not happen. I don't have concrete information to back that up. And indeed, it does seem as if both sides are keeping their cards very close to their chests. I can certainly understand that. In fact, it only even strengthens my instinct that this will not remain undecided. Iran is a very, very big country geographically. The challenge there militarily is not a small one, and toppling the regime is not the end game. Not only dismantling any possibility of a nuclear route and/or ballistic missile program, but also making sure that if and when the regime is indeed toppled, not a Libya kind of scenario will ensue, but rather a more organized transition of a very, very big country with many minorities and a huge population, and that Turkey and Qatar and extreme Sunni factors will not go into a vacuum to take over like happened in many other countries after regime, let's say, collapse. One example is Syria, for instance.
So, again, this is building on a theme that she's been saying. I've been playing clips of her for a couple months now. Turkey really is in charge of Syria. And there are some indications that Turkey wants to move beyond Syria into the Kurdish regions, into Iraq, and position itself, hey, we're here to help if Iran falls apart. And I would just encourage you, go read Daniel chapter 8, prophecy of the ram and the goat, which I believe is Persia, the ram, which is Persia, and the goat, which comes from the west. And everybody says that was Alexander the Great. That's fine, but understand there are some indications that that might be a prophecy for the end times, and you should pay attention to that. Go read it with a futuristic lens on what the scripture says. There are reports in Iran that there was another guy on I-24 the same day, and he said that the indications he has is that 200,000 people have been killed in Iran thus far. They're not returning bodies. There's executions going on in prison. The regime is holding the bodies. This is all very, very supremely evil. There were protests around the world yesterday. Toronto. By the way, in Canada, they had another one of these gender-confused people do a mass shooting. I don't even have time to talk about all of this stuff because I think it's all very significant. But in Toronto, you can watch, you can see on the right the crowd that formed. You see here they're forming and they're counting the people that were there. And the police said that at least 570,000 people showed up in Toronto in support of the people protesting in Iran. There were similar sized crowds in Munich. There was also in Toronto, Munich, Los Angeles, and other cities, massive crowds coming in support of regime change in Iran. I don't remember seeing things like this before. So here's a picture that I think this is Los Angeles. Here's another person at one of the rallies. This is a picture of the rally in Munich. And it's a big deal. So Pahlavi gave an interview. He talked at the Munich Security Conference. I don't have time to play that this morning. It's a big deal. So I have something I've got to talk about. I'll do a whole program on this. I may get some people to help me out, like Brian Schrager, Mark Sutherland and stuff, because I think this needs to be talked about. So this week, a boss released a draft constitution for the Palestinian Authority. I had all these were in order. I'm not sure what happened. Oh, I want to say this about Turkey. So we talk about Turkey having an expansionist mind, trying to acquire nuclear weapons, moving into other areas of the Mid-East. This is Hakan Fidan. This is his X account page, Foreign Minister of Turkey. And look at the picture there. It's a little bit dark. So what I did was I expanded it up and I sort of enhanced the color. That is how the Turkish government, Erdogan and the foreign minister, view Turkey growing to be the pivot point of the Middle East and the world. I've been talking about this for a very long time. They're in Ezekiel 38, 39. There's no question about it. And I think people really need to start paying attention to what they have planned. So two things to wrap. So they did a draft constitution in the Middle East, or in Palestinian Authority. I'll talk more about it in the future. I've got a copy of an English translation of it. They don't recognize Jews in Jerusalem. They don't recognize a Jewish state. You would think after everything that's happened in Gaza that we'll go along with it because it's not going to work out very well for us. And there are a lot of concern in Israel that the Judea-Samaria areas that the world calls the West Bank are ready to explode. And it's very concerning because we know what happened with the border in Gaza. The border fences are not strong enough to stop a sustained assault. And it's a very concerning thing. In light of that, everything that went on, there's a group in Israel called Commanders for Israel Security. And I have the document. You can see this is the Hebrew version. There's a shorter English language version. But in the Times, or Jerusalem Post, creeping West Bank annexation will sabotage the Gaza plan. So what happened? So there was a plan that came out about changing property transfer rules in Judea and Samaria this last week. And so immediately Commanders for Israel Security came out and said, no, this will destroy the potential two-state solution. They're living in a fantasy world. If you want to understand, there's plenty of blame to go around for everybody being asleep on October 7th. That determination has not been made. There will be a political campaign in Israel this year, and a lot of stuff is going to come out about that during that period of time. But these are former IDF commanders and security people, and they're saying we need a two-state solution, and trying to annex land and let Jews live in biblical heartland of Israel is going to destroy the two-state solution after watching what happened in Gaza. It's insanity. And read through the draft constitution and you will say they're all insane. They act like nothing's ever happened, and it's jihad all the way at breakneck speed. So, okay. Oh, I wanted to do one thing before I get to this. So Ray Dalio, he does a big hedge fund, and so he did an article about the Munich Security Conference, and he looked at the Munich Security Report. Now, this is a smart guy. He's a big multi-billionaire business guy, and he said, at the Munich Security Conference, the post-1945 world order was pronounced dead by most leaders, and the picture behind it was laid out in the security report entitled Under Destruction. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said the world order as it has stood for decades no longer exists. Again, the world is changing at breakneck speed, and that we are in a period of great power politics. He made clear that freedom is no longer a given in this new era. French President Emmanuel Macron echoed Merz's assessment and said that Europe's old security structures tied to the previous world order don't exist and that Europe must prepare for war. And again, they want to prepare for war. If you think it's a revived Roman Empire base in Europe, you've got some ammunition for it, if they make ammunition to back it up. In my parlance, we are in the stage 6 part of the big cycle in which there is great disorder arising from being in a period in which there are no rules, might is right, and there is a clash of great powers. How stage works is explained in detail in Chapter 6 of the Munich Security Report, the big cycle of external order and disorder. In my book, Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order. While I previously shared a lengthy set of excerpts from Chapter 5 of that book, so you can see how what is going on with the United States tracks the classic cycle explained in the chapter. He publishes, and so there's a link in the show notes. There will be a link in the show notes so you can read through his article. And what does he say? There are 5 major kinds of fights between countries coming: trade economic wars, technology wars, geopolitical wars, capital wars, and military wars. And you think, I got a negative outlook? Look, he's a very realistic person. All-out wars typically occur when existential issues are at stake and they cannot be resolved by peaceful means. And so Marco Rubio, and he goes through and he shows how these things have cycled throughout history. I highly recommend that you read this article for background purposes. Now I want to do this. So LifeSite News tweets this the other day, or posts this. Now, LifeSite News is a Catholic site, pro-life, anti-abortion. But they are anti-Jewish. You need to be careful with this Catholic, anti-Jew, Jew hatred nonsense that you're going to see. It's growing everywhere. You see it all over Bannon's War Room, where there are a bunch of Catholics spouting this stuff. You see it everywhere you look. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. That is anti-Semitism. If you don't believe the Jews get a little country in the Middle East the size of New Jersey That's the biggest problem in the world. You're a Jew hater. You're anti. When there is a sea of Arab countries around, many of which have vastly more oil than Israel does, oil and gas. By the way, the Israel stock market over the last 2 years, I have a chart in here someplace. Tel Aviv stock index from 2022 to now, it's up from index was 1420 in 22. It's now 14,030, up 10 times in a couple of years. But I only bring this up, and again, I will talk more about this with other people. I don't know if you saw this dust up with Carrie Prejean. She was Miss California USA. There were a lot of litigation over, I think she had to give back her crown. She's married to a former NFL person. Somehow, somebody who needs to be fired got her appointed to the Religious Liberty Commission, and the subject of anti-Semitism came up, and I watched it. She hijacked it to spew her Jew hatred, wrapped in the Christ is King moniker that she had. She showed up at this hearing on religious liberty with a pen. One part of it was the United States flag. The other part of it was a Palestinian flag. A flag of a country does not exist. And she was going, and so now here, Catholics is going to present an award to her in another week, or shortly, March 19th in Washington, D.C. at the Catholic Prayer for America, and they're going to honor her, and they're also going to have Matt Walsh, Candace Owens, and General Flynn. And she said at that hearing, there's nothing anti-Semitic at all that Candace Owens has ever said. I think she has her tiara wrapped a little too tight. It's nonsense, but she's all over the place. And Insurrection Barbie and some others. So we're going to do this. She's going to be receive the Catholic Champion Award for defense of the Catholic faith. She spouted nothing in support of the Catholic faith. It was rank anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, call it what you will. It was Jew hatred. I watched it. I'm smart enough to figure it out. So there's a long post that somebody said, I'm telling all of you right now, what you're witnessing is an AstroTurf revival of the Christian Front movement of the late 1930s, early 1940s. Catholics in the U.S. would do well to reject it with prejudice, even as some very prominent conservative religious groups work to sanitize and normalize it. Practically speaking, this virulent form of Christian nationalism is the closest thing to Islamist totalitarianism that America has mass-produced in the years since its founding. This is Islamic based. There are pictures all over of Carrie on her phone getting talking points from CARE and Palestinian activists, and pictures of her standing there with Palestinian activists before or after this meeting. She is an Islamist Jew hater, and she wraps herself in this Christ is King flag. It's disgusting. It's worth noting that this movement ultimately merged religious zealotry with violence. Long live Christ the King was one of its refrains from back in the 30s and 40s. Heard anything similar recently? This is a power play protected by the armor of religious piety. Reject it, or it will fracture us. And that is what it's designed. I can show you other articles that have analyzed this. This is a Russian op. For example, here's a podcast that was done with Trevor Loudon, who I've interviewed. Here we go.
Another thing, there's a big move towards anti-Semitism and among
I was just going to ask you what is going on with that. What is going on with that?
It is purely a Russian-driven phenomenon. Purely
Okay.
Russian. That is, and that's why you get people like Nick Fuentes promoting it. That's why you get Tucker Carlson subtly promoting it. That's because the pro-Russian people are also very much moving in the anti-Israel, anti-Semitism direction. Why? Because Russia wants to dominate the Middle East, and Israel's the main impediment. So you got to break the bonds between Israel and the United States. And they've done this in the Democratic Party through using the left, Democratic Socialists of America, Palestine Youth Movement.
And Trevor goes on to say, this is what they're doing on the right in America. This is a Russian operation, the Russian anti-Jewish game. And Carrie Prejean has been dragged into that willingly. And all of these Catholics for Catholics and other things like LifeSite News, don't follow it. Stop watching it. They're they claim to be pro-family and anti-abortion. You can get that information from a lot of other sites without the Jew hatred built in. Okay, I don't have time to do any more. So let's, I have about 1,000 slides that I didn't get to. So I'll be doing some interviews this week, and it's going to be interesting to see. So let's pray. And again, look at the show notes. I will put links down there today. Lord, thank you so much for the blessing that you gave us when you gave us true prophets, not fake prophets, but true prophets to follow, that spoke the truth, that indicated conditions that would exist in the world near the time of your return. Lord, pray that you will open our eyes to see the things that are going on, open other teachers and preachers to this truth. Pray that you will help us to stand firm in the faith, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. Pray that you'll give us opportunities to share the gospel with those around us. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.